Hi there, my name is Mara. Welcome to the webinar. Today we'll be talking about the BBB standards for charity accountability and how to meet them. Today's speakers will be me, Mara McGinnis, the manager of the Charity Accountability Program, and my colleague Erica Andrew, who is the Charity Accountability Program Associate. Before I get started today, I just wanted to let everyone know that we will definitely be sending the slides at the end of this broadcast, and we will be sending a recording a few weeks later. So we will jump right in. Feel free to ask any questions throughout the broadcast. If we are able to answer them during the broadcast, we will. If we need to wait until after the broadcast, I will email you separately. So the BBB was founded over 100 years ago for just a frame of reference of why we do what we do. Our vision is an ethical marketplace where buyers and sellers can trust each other. So on the BBB side, that is with businesses and consumers, but today we'll be talking about donors and charities. So the way that we do that is that we set standards for marketplace trust, and our mission is to educate consumers and businesses as well as charities and donors. So part of what we do, of why we do it, is we do charity accountability reports, which is why we're here today. We also conduct educational programs for charities and businesses to enhance their performance and impact, to meet high standards, and to detect and prevent fraud. So again, our mission is to be a leader in advancing marketplace trust. A little bit about BBB charity reporting. There are 61 programs in the BBB system, and at a national level, we report on about 1,400 reports. In the Metro New York BBB area, we have 775 reports in our local area. We may have some upstate New York charities that are on the line, so hello upstate New York charities. They're also a part of our program, and combined we have 2,200 in New York State. So why do we do it? Why do we do charity reports at all? Is because businesses and consumer asks for it. So back in the 1920s, we were actually asked by consumers to indicate if charities are legitimate. And today we are still asked that question, but now we go a little bit more above and beyond with our questions, and we see a holistic picture of what a charity report could look like, and meeting those high transparency and ethical standards is why we are here today. So of our 20 standards that we will cover today, they're going to cover 4 facets. They're going to cover governance and oversight, financial information, measuring your effectiveness, and fundraising information. Some 3 recommended practices are diversity and pluralism, adherence to the law, and prioritizing openness and ethical behavior. So we're going to dive into those a little bit later. But some guiding concepts for the BBB standards is that it is a voluntary disclosure. Some consumers will come to us and ask if we can shut down a charity, and that's not at all what we do. What we do is we want to make sure that we are accurately reporting on BBB charities in our service area. So that indicates for us our 20 standards, but of course we always emphasize different duties of care, loyalty, and obedience, and focusing on achieving a nonprofit mission. The way that we do that is that we evaluate key practices. This is not a ratings-based system. So some consumers may ask if this is an A-rated charity or an F-rated charity. That's not what we do. What we do is we operate on a standards-based, so you meet all 20 standards, that means that you are an accredited charity. And the way that we do that is we work almost exclusively with the GAAP principles. So that's the generally accepted accounting principles. We look at financial statements that are GAAP approved, because as we know in the charity community, in the nonprofit community, the accountability is more than financials, right? It's more than how much we spend on programs. It's actually how we advance our mission and advance our programs. So the benefit to donors of a BBB charity report is that it is a free and quick way to check if standards are check if charities are meeting high standards. And also the BBB charity seal is a widely recognized and valued charity trust mark. So when consumers and donors, web visitors, see that BBB seal, they can see that the charity has been evaluated by the BBB and has met those standards. The benefit to charities can vary depend on the charity, but the standards are helpful key practices for charities who are a little bit smaller, who are coming into their own and developing more robust policies. That is a good way for charities to get started on developing those policies. When they grow bigger, they'll already have them in place and have that foundation. For larger charities and for all charities, the BBB seal is a fundraising tool for BBB accredited charities only. So if you meet the 20 standards, you will have the ability to license our seal. And the way that you would do that would be on a sliding scale based on public contributions. We'll talk about that in a little bit, but to talk a little bit more about what the report would look like if you were to meet our 20 standards would be, again, this 20 standards-based system. So if you meet all these 20 standards, you would see the green check marks that indicate that you have met all of our 20 standards. There would be some basic information, including the purpose, the programs, and a little bit about your governance and staff, fundraising methods, and your tax status. The donor would also be able to see a little pie chart that indicates how much is being spent on programs, fundraising, and administrative expenses, as well as where your funds come from. A little bit more about the BBB charity study and about the BBB charity seal is that we did a research project with Professor Greg Chen of Baruch School of Public Affairs. And what we found was that we can't say it is a causation, but there is a correlation in meeting all 20 BBB standards and a 13.5% increase in fundraising revenue for Metro New York charities and 8% in fundraising revenue in national charities. We also found that 73% are more likely to donate if a charity displays the BBB accredited charity seal on an appeal. So the way that you would do that would be online, it would be in an e-blast, it could be on a fundraising invite. Wherever you solicit donations, you would be able to put that BBB seal on. So Erica, if you want to talk a little bit about the general areas of focus for the BBB program.
Sure. So when we are evaluating charities, like Mara was saying, we are doing this to increase trust between consumers and the charities that they are donating to. So we look for organizations that are publicly soliciting donations. That does include government grants. We also look for organizations that are in the news or otherwise of interest to the public, and charities who have been in operations for 3 or more years. Those are the charities that we generally evaluate, but we also will evaluate any charity who requests a BBB charity report. So jumping into the standards, they do break down into 4 categories. So we have governance, measuring effectiveness, financials, and fundraising and communications. So the first few have to do with governance, and the first standard involves the oversight of the charity's operations by the board of directors. So the purpose of this standard is just to make sure that the board of directors has adequate oversight over all different aspects of the operations. So things like approving the budget, monitoring a conflict of interest policy, reviewing and approving the 990 financial statements, and also having a regular CEO performance review. We recommend at least once every 2 years. So this has been a new addition to the standard in 2019. We also now look for an organization to be in compliance with any applicable government charity regulations. So standard 2, a little bit shorter, we look for a board of directors to have at least 5 voting members, and that's just to ensure that there's a number of opinions going into those large-scale decisions at the leadership level. Standard 3 involves board meeting attendance. So The purpose of the standard is to make sure that the board is regularly meeting and having face-to-face discussions, because we feel like the best work, the most productive conversations are had ideally face-to-face when all board members can be seen and heard. So what we look for is 3 evenly spaced board meetings throughout the year with at least a majority in attendance. So we look for those meetings to be face-to-face. One can be a conference call, and that would count towards the standard. And if you have members who teleconference in, so they can be seen and heard, that would count as face-to-face. So if you have a board where the members are, scattered all over the country, Google Hangout or Skype or anything like that would be sufficient. So standard 4, if we want to just go back to the last slide. Standard 4 involves board member compensation. So we want to make sure that the board is composed of some independent leaders who do not have financial stake in the organization. So the threshold that we set for that is that not more than 1 or 10%, whichever is greater, directly compensated people may serve as voting members of the board. And we also look at who is compensated when we're looking at that. So the board chair cannot be compensated, and the board treasurer cannot be compensated. And also the board chair must be separate from the CEO of the organization, as well as the board treasurer must be separate from the CEO of the organization. The board chair also must be separate from the board treasurer, so there need to be 2 independent board members serving in each of those roles. And right, the CEO cannot serve as the chair of the board, whoever fills the role of the CEO, even if that isn't their official title, if it is executive director or president of the organization, they still may not serve as the chair. So our last governance standard involves related party transactions. So those are transactions where board or staff members may have material conflicting interests with the charity from any family relationship or business affiliation or something like that. So an important part here is to have a conflict of interest policy, which is a New York state law. But what we really look at is that an organization is adhering to that policy, and that if there is an instance of a related party transaction, that the interested board member or the interested staff member is just removed from the decision, and competitive bids are sought, and just that they're left out of that action. So that is the last of our governance standards. So we're going to move on to the measuring effectiveness category now. This was the second most missed standard in 2018, so I do think it's really important to touch on it. So standard 6 involves having a board policy of assessing regularly, so we consider that no less than every 2 years, the organization's performance and effectiveness, essentially towards meeting its mission and determining what actions may need to be taken to achieve that mission. So this policy can take a lot of forms. It doesn't have to necessarily be labeled a measuring effectiveness policy. It can be a strategic plan. It can be an organizational assessment. The really important part is that it occurs regularly and that the organization is looking, beyond just the financials, beyond the budget, and is really looking at how it is working towards its mission and how the programs are doing and what needs to be done moving forward. So again, these are just the items that Standard 6 calls for, and we look to just see the policy. We're not here to judge that process. We're not here to judge the results. We just want to make sure that this is a board-approved policy so that these assessments are happening regularly, regardless of any changes in leadership at the organization level. So Standard 7 involves the written report of the measuring effectiveness policy. A really important component of this assessment, we think, is to have a written report presented to the board. So we don't ask to see the written report of the effectiveness assessment. Again, that is part of your process that we are not here to judge. We just want to make sure that it's happening. So this can be a report that's presented to the board. This could be anything that is written that just facilitates that discussion of the effectiveness against mission goals and recommendations for the future. We have this tool, the 5 questions from Charting Impact, that serve as a really great basis for those discussions, for maybe that written report, or even just formulating a measuring effectiveness policy. And that is, what is your organization aiming to accomplish? What are your strategies for making this happen? What are your organization's capabilities for doing this? How will your organization know if you're making progress? And what have and haven't you accomplished so far? So those benchmarks are just like conversational points that are productive for this.
I would also like to add that if you do not have a measuring effectiveness policy as of right now, we will be able to provide samples of what that could look like after I send the slides to you in a follow-up email. So I just wanted to touch on that, but great job, Erica.
So those were the measuring effectiveness standards, and now we're moving on to the financials. So these standards are kind of split in half. So the first couple, 8, 9, and 10, they set target spending ratios. So before we jump into those ratios, we just wanted to touch on the overhead myth, that people have that misconception that charities should be spending 100% on programs, or as much as they possibly can on programs. And we want to make sure that we, instead of just having financial standards based on what do you spend on programs, we look at the whole picture of an organization. Organizations need to spend money on fundraising to get fundraising revenue, and organizations need to spend money on administrative expenses like having an office and keeping the lights on. So we think that our standards are able to capture more of the whole picture of an organization rather than just what's spent on programs. And again, other factors matter, including transparency and governance, leadership. So financials, your organization is definitely more than just financials. But with that being said, we do want overhead to be kind of kept in mind. And so we do want to say that about 91% of our Metro New York BBB evaluated charities do meet these program and fundraising ratio standards, and 9% or fewer do not meet them. So we do think that these standards are attainable for organizations regardless of size or focus or really anything like that. They just kind of set baseline benchmarks. So that being said, Standard 8 is about your program expense ratio. So we just look for your program expenses to be 65% or more of your total expenses. So in your financial statements, they will break down program expenses versus total expenses so that we can divide your program expenses by your total. And as long as that is at least 65%, then you are all set and you're meeting Standard 8. So there are some misunderstandings about what is and isn't a program expense, and we recommend that that is something that you speak with your auditor about, just to make sure that you have that categorized. And then Standard 9 relates to fundraising expenses and fundraising revenues. So we look for 35% or less of related contributions to be spent on fundraising. So for this, we're looking for the money that is spent on fundraising divided by the money that comes in as a result of fundraising. So we want to make sure that to make back $1, you're not spending more than 35 cents. So to calculate those related contributions, we're looking at anything that is related to your fundraising. So that could be donations from individuals, that could be donations from private or corporate funders, in-kind contributions. If those are broken out in your audit, those would be considered as part of your related contributions. Bequests, government grants, just not contracts, and any special events fundraising revenue.
Okay, thank you so much, Erica.
Thank you.
So I am going to be finishing off the standards 10 through 20. Regarding this one in particular is the last one that has to do with ratios, and this is in reference to accumulations of funds. So when we're looking at accumulations of funds, we're primarily looking at unrestricted net assets. And what this standard as a guiding principle indicates is that you should not have 3 times your past year's expenses sitting in unrestricted net assets. And when we put on these in-person standards briefings, oftentimes we get charities saying, well, we'd be lucky to be in a position where we have 3 times our past year's expenses in unrestricted net assets. And that's true. If you are in the position of having that much money in your unrestricted net assets, it's not necessarily immediately going to be a bad thing or a standard that you would be missed. If you would have 3 times your past year's expenses, what we would ask in regards to transparency was if it is over the limit, you can meet the standards by complying with disclosure requirements, indirect mail, and marketing appeals, indicating that, we have this unrestricted reserve and these are our intentions for them, or we have this because of a extenuating circumstance. The main focus of all of these standards is making it clear to donors that you're being very transparent about where your money is being spent, and these financial standards kind of capture that. So when we're looking at unrestricted net assets, we're not talking about fixed assets like land, building, any computer equipment. So that's what we are talking about in terms of the accumulation of funds. And again, why is this important? Because donors expect that their contributions will be spent on current programs. This has been confirmed in public survey research, and that we just want to make sure that donors are not misled if there is an appeal indicating that they are asking for donations. It should just be clear what the financial picture looks like for that particular organization. Now that we've wrapped up our ratios, I'm going to finish off standards 11 through 14. Standard 11 is about availability, and this is about making available to all upon request complete annual financial statements. So there's a little part on your 990, I want to say it's maybe the 3rd or 4th page that says, do you release your financial statements upon request? And, again, as Erica said, 91% of our charities meet these standards. So the 990 itself is a public document, but the financial statements, there is the obligation there to share with your donors upon request. So the new national standard is that over $1 million per income per year requires a full CPA audit. Between $250,000 and $1 million is a CPA review, and under $250,000 is internally prepared statement. So there is a note here. Currently in New York State requires an audit at $750,000. So if you have any questions about that, definitely please feel free to reach out to me, and definitely feel free to look at the charitiesnewyorkstate.com link there when I send this over. Standard 12 begins what I will be repeating a few times, so bear with me here, but we want to make sure, and we're going to emphasize a few times, that when you are reporting your financial picture to your donors, you want to be clear with them where it is being categorized. So is it a program expense, a fundraising expense, or an administrative expense? This can also be called development or management in general. And when we're talking about programs, we're also talking about having multiple programs. So if you look over here at this functional breakdown of expenses on the screen, you'll see that there's a category for Program A and Program B, fundraising and admin. So if you're an organization that does almost exclusively education programs, then it would probably all qualify as education program expenses. But let's say that you have a food pantry as well as educational resources. Those programs look a little different, so then they should probably be categorized as such. But we want to make sure that if you have any questions about that, definitely speak to your accountant or your auditor to make sure that you're being as transparent about those expenses as you can. Why is this important? Well, we think it's a critical management tool for staff and board. So this can really tell a financial picture, tell a financial story and paint a financial picture to funders and stakeholders about where your expenses are going. GAAP actually does require this for health and welfare organizations to break this down, so it's a good practice to just jump right into. Your IRS Form 990, page 10 also includes it. Standard 13 of our financial standards is accurately reporting the organization's expenses, including joint cost allocations. There is also on that page 10, there is a space for joint cost allocations. Essentially what that means is that we want to make sure that we understand the true amount spent on fundraising. And this is usually an issue when a charity claims $0 are spent on fundraising expenses. So we just want to make sure that we are accurately reporting that to donors. And to wrap up our financial standards, we'll be talking about the standard 14, which is the budget. This is actually one of the most missed standards, as well as the measuring effectiveness policy. All we're looking for is a budget that is board approved, so making sure that your board sees this and approves it. And it must contain the projected expenses, which are program, fundraising, and administrative expenses broken out. Very similar to your audit, but it doesn't require as much information. So if we go back and we look at standard 12, you can see the natural cost allocations like travel, postage, etc. That doesn't need to be included in the budget. Really what we're looking for is a budget that looks like this. We're looking for a budget that has program services, that has its different programs broken out, and we get the totals of those programs. We also get the fundraising and administrative expenses broken out separately. That's what we're looking for. Sometimes we get budgets that say management in general, management and development, which is just one cost. We want to make sure that we're breaking this out. If you're going to have to do it for the audit, you're going to have to do it for the 990, why not just do it for the budget as well? Again, we do think it is a critical management tool in guiding your programs and guiding your mission. If you don't have a budget that is broken out in this way, we do have a link and a resource to provide about how you can categorize staff salaries, programs, management in general. So I will be sending this after. So now that we are all wrapped up with financial standards, we will jump into fundraising standards. So again, standard 15, a little bit what I had indicated earlier is why we do what we do, and donors asked for it. So when donors receive appeals that may be perceived as misleading or they're not telling the whole story, that's when the BBB would look into it. So that applies to today. So we want to make sure that when we're talking to our donors or we're talking to potential donors, that the stories and the photos that we're using are accurate, the key facts are accurate. Better to avoid using overhead ratios in fundraising appeals because that contributes to the overhead myth. And if used, we always check for accuracy. So we want to protect donors, we want to protect your charity. So we want to be sure that we're explaining clearly how funds are being used. So we want to avoid language like 100% of your gift will go to Tyler in buying him a new pair of shoes. That would need to be indicated in your audit as a reserved fund for Tyler and his shoes. So we want to say 100% of your gift will go to furthering the mission for kids like Tyler. Things like that, those caveats are actually really important for fundraising information and fundraising appeals. So vague or inaccurate claims about the impact, just always be cautious of that and definitely make sure that your development team is talking with your legal team and making sure that what you're saying to donors and the public can be verified and substantiated. Standard 16 is about the annual report. This was the most missed BBB standard in 2018, actually. So just to clarify what we're looking for in an annual report. And this does not need to be a glossy, sprawling template that I know that some charities do use, which are beautiful, but they are definitely not necessary. What we are asking for here is to have one document available upon request that includes the mission of the organization, summary of past year's program results, and this also includes key facts and figures. So saying something like 550 students attended our summer camp is a little bit more of a program service accomplishment than we serve kids at a summer camp. So making sure that donors and potential donors have that information, as well as a roster of the board. So things like a chair, treasurer, secretary, and any members of the board. And then to include your financial information too in an annual report. So just including the total income, expenses broken down by program admin and fundraising, as well as ending net assets. I have seen some charities just toss in their statement of activity from the audit right into their annual report, as well as the balance sheet, and that definitely meets our standards. You may think that why not just use your 990? You can use your 990 if you include those program service accomplishments. So on that page 2, when there's that little space you get to talk about how much money went toward a program and to give a brief description of the program, we would advise, even if you do an annual report, why not just put some program service accomplishments there? So it's the second thing that people see when you're looking at a 990, and then that would meet our BBB Standard 16, which is an annual report. Standard 17 is about website disclosures. So this only applies if a charity's website is soliciting for donations by any means. So that could be requested mailed contributions, accepted electronically. It's 2019. Most charities are asking for donations through their website because why not? So if you do solicit, then the information that we would ask for would be all of the information from the annual report. So the easiest way to do that would be to create an annual report and to upload a PDF of it on your website. That way, it is always available, so donors don't even have to request it from you. And if you need to ever mail that to someone without internet connection, you'll be able to do that. So we look for an annual report essentially to be on your website, as well as your mailing address and your most recent 990. This can also include a link to GuideStar that gives the information of your 990. So if you have a GuideStar link, that meets our standard. But we just want to make sure for legitimacy and transparency purposes that all of this information is available to donors. Standard 18 addresses the concerns of privacy. So again, if you have a website, we would ask that you have a privacy policy on that. What we would look for in a privacy policy would be a clear and accessible link, so it's not hidden anywhere. Probably right at the bottom of your page is where we most often see it. And what we would ask for that policy to say is, what information is being collected and how will it be used, right? So is my name being collected, my email, my address? How are you going to use it? Are you going to send me things in the mail? Are you going to only email me? So just make it clear as possible how you intend to use the information that's being collected. How to contact the charity to review and correct information. So often this may look like, if someone on your team specifically handles privacy or IT information. This could also just be like an info@charity.org. So how to contact them, how to tell a charity not to share personal information outside of the organization. So if you are a charity that does share information, make sure that you include a checkoff next to that form where it says the name and address of the donor. Make sure that you can check that off to say, no, I would not like to share my information. And finally, what security measures are in place? So how will you safeguard my information to ensure that it is safe to give you my information? So that has to do with privacy. So opting out can take the form of a check-off box, but also just anywhere that you send a solicitation, make it clear how you can, how a donor or someone who is receiving that information can opt out of that. So whether it be a direct mail appeal or an e-blast through Constant Contact, the unsubscribe is always there, but just make it easy for donors. If you have any questions about cyber or data security information at all, the BBB and the FTC have some information about this that I'll be sending off later. Standard 19 is the last of our fundraising standards. So this is cause-related marketing. So if you are an organization that works with a for-profit business to find a mutual benefit, that would mean that you are operating with cause-related marketing. So if you are doing that, then there are a few ways to do this in a way that is fully transparent to donors. So if you are someone who is participating in cause-related marketing, there are New York State guidelines about how to go about cause-related marketing, and ours are very similar. So our organizations must provide actual or anticipated portion of purchase price to benefit the charity. So sometimes you may see a solicitation that says, we'll donate some money to this charity. Well, how much is actually going and for how long is this going? So if this is a time-limited campaign, let's say it's the holiday season and it goes until December 31st, then you would need to indicate how long this promotion is going. If it is a max limitation, so until we reach $25,000, we're going to keep the campaign on. So just making sure that the actual portion is given to the public, as well as how long the promotion will be running. So per the New York Attorney General, actually, you should name any charity being benefited, give the mission if not obvious, and specify consumer action. So we have seen some solicitations that may say, 5 cents will be donated to children's cancer. What organization is this actually going to be benefiting? You have to name that charity. And that wraps up cause-related marketing. The last standard has to do with complaints. So you may know BBB from someone saying, oh, my refrigerator broke and the company is not honoring the warranty. I need to go complain to the BBB. That's often what we're known for. We actually do complaints regarding charities as well. The types of complaints that we handle are all about marketplace transactions. So let's say it's something like, I donated $20 to this charity and they told me I would get a free t-shirt. I never received my t-shirt. That's actually a complaint that we would handle. So we would go to the charity and indicate that this is the desired resolution. We would mediate that and making sure that the charity is very prompt about its response. That's how you meet Standard 20. So the top 10 missed BBB standards, number 16 was annual report, 6 was effectiveness policy, and 17 was website disclosures. So keeping those in mind, if you don't already do them, if you don't have a BBB report, that would be a good place to start in terms of meeting those standards. If you would like a full list of the BBB standards for charity accountability, here is the link for that I'll be sending over. Erica, if you want to touch a little bit on the disclosure process and how that works to get going on the report.
Yeah, absolutely. So when you have a BBB charity report, I'm not sure if we touched on this, but it is valid for 2 years. So if you have a September 1st, 2019 report, it's active and valid until September 1st, 2021. So if you do have a report, we would be reaching out to you about 6 months in advance, just letting you know you're up for renewal. But if not, you would just reach out to us at charity@newyork.bbb.org, like it says right up there, requesting some login information. So we would make a profile for you on our online portal so that you'll be able to complete the entire renewal. So when you log into our online portal, you are able to initiate a new report, and then a bunch of tabs pop up that have to do with, board and measuring effectiveness. And all of these tabs request information that corresponds with our standards. So we request your for example, board meeting attendance log so that we can evaluate standard 3. So once you submit all of that information, you sign a little approval form that says, I completed the renewal and it's ready to be evaluated. And at that point, we would evaluate on our end the materials that you submitted, the different documents, the different information, and see if you are meeting our standards, or if there are any areas that maybe we don't have enough information to determine if you're meeting a standard, or something needs a little bit of adjusting. In any case, if you aren't meeting all 20 standards right off the bat, we would reach out to you and ask any questions we may have, or give you any suggestions that we may have to move forward. So at that point, we would continue to work together until we reach a stopping point. So if you're meeting all standards, if there's any kind of stopping point that we reach, then we would compose a draft report. So we would have a PDF draft of exactly what your report would look like if published to our website, and then send that over to you to make sure that you have a chance to look at it and see if any information is outdated, if anything's been changed, just to make sure that the report is factually accurate before we publish it to our website. And once you review that and approve that, then it's published to our website and valid for 2 years. So within those 2 years, you're not required to make any updates, but you're always welcome to.
Thank you. I know that Erin had asked a question, will you demonstrate how to navigate the BBB website to start the process of completing a renewal? We won't do that in this particular webinar, but Erica actually just recorded a tutorial about how to submit for a BBB charity report. So I would be happy to share that with you and with the rest of the listeners in the email that will be going out after this presentation. So thank you for asking that. If you would like some additional information about the New York State Attorney General and keeping up to date with any New York State regulatory information, here's the place to do so. Any financial accounting standards board changes, this is the place to do so, FASB.org. The New York State Nonprofit Revitalization Act of 2013 is always important, so if you need to review that, definitely feel free to use these resources. Now, if you meet all of our 20 standards, I had talked a little bit about this in the beginning, but if you do meet these standards, you would be eligible to become a BBB charity seal holder. So the BBB seal can be used on all of your solicitations so long as you complete the licensing fee and agreement. The sliding scale is published on our website, so if you have any questions or any trouble finding that, feel free to let me know. Only BBB accredited charities may join this optional program. So there is no cost to begin a BBB charity report and to publish it. And for all web visitors of bbb.org to come to our website and to look you up, that would be free to be an accredited charity in that way. Also using Google or any search engine to see if you are an accredited charity. That is free. Now, if you were to become a BBB seal holder, this is what it would look like. This is our BBB seal at the bottom of one of our charities. Now, if you click on that, it brings you right up to our report on that charity that indicates that they do meet all 20 standards. If you are a seal holder, it is important to include this on your website so donors can verify that, yes, you are meeting our 20 standards and that the report is active and current. So if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. We wrapped up a little bit earlier than we usually do. So if you have any questions, feel free to let us know. We can hang around for the next 5 minutes to see if there are any questions. And yeah, so feel free to ask questions. Thank you. So we did receive a question from Jessica who asked if we would be able to provide in detail the 20 standards discussed today. I will be sending the slides after this. So if you have any further questions and you need anything more in detail, I'd be happy to give it to you. We are also planning on publishing this webinar. So if you would like to listen to this webinar in maybe a week or so, we'd be happy to send that to you. But we also do have a published recorded webinar. So if that fits your needs, then we should be all good there. All right, well, I think that just about wraps it up. So thank you everyone again for joining us today to talk about the BBB 20 standards. I can be contacted at the email below, and also it should have been in the email that went out to you. So if you have any further questions for Erica or myself, I would be happy to talk offline with you. And thank you very much for joining us. Take care.